Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. This is Mark Kennedy, Hawkeye Sidekick, presenting another hurling podcast episode. I'm joined this week by Kieran Collins, and great to see you back, Ruairi Walsh as well. Lads, how are things?
Good, Mark.
Good, Mark. Thank you.
Great. All good. I suppose tonight, lads, let's digest what happened this weekend, or last weekend, with the Munster Senior Hurling Championship. Leinster provided a few fireworks as well. Joe McDonagh Cup final, one of the games of the season. Carlow beating Offaly. And we'll also have a preview of the All-Ireland Under-20 and Minor final set this weekend for FBT Semple Stadium. I suppose, guys, let's kick off with Munster Senior Hurling Championship. Two fixtures on tap here. Limerick hosted Cork, while Tipperary and Waterford faced off in Semple Stadium. I suppose, Kieran, let's get to Limerick versus Cork, which was televised live on RT. What an incredible advert for Munster hurling again, and for hurling in general.
I suppose, there was plenty of drama, wasn't there, really? And, I suppose a perfect day for hurling with the weather we're having at the minute, and, 40,000 squeezed in, and, the noise and the colour, and, back to what we know it was. And that was an incredible game. And I think we've been blessed this year with the Munster Championship, how good it's been, bar maybe one or two games that were kind of bit of a letdown. But other than that, the games have been, really, really intense. There's been only a buck of a wall between most teams, which it kind of shows that, like, the three or four teams in that were competitive, there's very little between them. And I suppose you look at Cork going out, on any day there's only a point in the difference between Limerick and Cork, and the same with Clare and Cork, and obviously Cork drew with Tipperary, so it's fine margins, and I suppose Cork will look back with a bit of regret. I suppose on a different day they might have got a result in either of them three games, but I suppose you have to do it on the day, and it'll be a hard pill to take for the next while. But I'm sure, look, we've seen definitely positives from Cork this year that I suppose we haven't seen from Cork in years gone by, and I'm sure Pat Ryan and his crew will build on that. And it's been probably a good year through. There'll be more negatives than positives in a minute, but I think when they strip it all back, it has been a good year progression-wise.
Absolutely. Ruairi, we'll get you in there. I mean, start of this game was absolute whirlwind stuff from Cork, wasn't it? They weren't missing anything from 40, 50 metres out. Great movement in the middle third, creating space. Patrick Horgan, Hardney, the usual suspects here. And I mean, looked ominous for Limerick in the opening 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, they were so clinical as well, and just so composed on the ball. We've seen before when Cork played Limerick, like the Limerick physicality has upset them in the past, but we could see from Cork even in the earlier games this year that they were, there was a bit more steel about them, and they were remaining composed on it. Up in Ennis in the previous game, I kind of thought for a while like they lost their way. They started well in that game as well, as we know, and led clear and looked really good. Bit similar to yesterday. But yesterday I thought they played better for longer spells. Kieran Joyce, the centre back, is a revelation for them. Like, he is their sixth now for the next 10 years. The guy's only 21 years of age, so he's really steady head. Didn't lose his cool at any stage. His position was excellent, and their half back line did quite well. I know you're still saying Hegarty, Morrissey, played really well for Limerick in the half forward line, but the Cork half back line, you could say, held their own and launched a lot of those attacks in the first half. As the game wore on, I think Limerick began to get a bit more joy in the half forward line. But for a long spells, I thought Cork were well in the game. And also we saw in previous years where when Limerick went up 6-7 points on Cork, it was kind of white flag was waved. But yesterday we saw this new resilience that they came back at them and brought it right down to the wire. And had they got that equalising point, it would have been Tipperary who'd have been out, and maybe you could say justifiably so based on their performance yesterday. Tipperary couldn't have had many complaints if they were dumped out yesterday. But look, funny as well with Cork, like last year they qualified, this year they didn't, and everybody's saying, there's more about them this year. Well, that is true. Like last year they had two really poor performances. Clare beat them well in Thurles in what was their home game last year. Because Ed Sheeran, wasn't it? And
Ed, yeah.
And Limerick hammered them down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. So, but this year they were way more competitive throughout all the games. And as Kieran alluded to, the margins were so tight this year that they could have been out and qualified out of Munster. But so look, even though they qualified last year and didn't this year, definitely the signs are a lot more positive this year that they are building something. And with the 20s in that Ireland final, and as we know, some seriously talented players like Ben Cunningham and that coming through in that team, it looks like, when lads are saying the Rebels are back, I think this time they actually could be, which makes Munster, even more competitive going down the stretch. And if Waterford have a bit of a resurgence again next year, if they can, build on what they did yesterday, like it's going to be another minefield next year. But for the moment, I'm just glad Clare came out the right side of it, because even some of the games like Clare Limerick, Clare won by a point, Clare Cork, another point in the difference. Like those games flipped the wrong way, and you'll be, sitting down watching the rest of the championship on telly, like without your county there,
God, when we consider the first round here, Rory, as well, from a Clare perspective, that home loss to Tipperary, you had been fearing on this, particularly in the preview of the Munster Hurling Championship, that game, if the result hadn't gone Clare's favour. So it's all credit to Clare for what they've done in terms of the rest of the round robin. I suppose going back to the game here, Kieran, goals win games, and Limerick got goals really at pivotal times here, didn't they? And with Aaron Gillan and Seamus Flanagan prominent in the insightful forward line.
Yeah, I think because it probably stopped the rot a little bit, because Cork were on a bit of a trot. They had 6 points scored, without reply for Limerick. Limerick went 7-5 ahead after 14 minutes, and Cork got the next 6 points. And you're thinking Limerick were all start to bother, but the 2 goals, I suppose in quick enough succession, closed that gap down again, and I suppose made it a closer game towards half time. I think that's one negative we would take from Cork this year, is coming in and out of games. I think we've seen it. The Tipperary game was probably their biggest period. Like Tipperary got 10 points in the trot in the second quarter in that game. And after Cork's quick start, like Cork were electric in the first 5-10 minutes. You could probably say the same again the weekend here. They had their purple patches, but when the purple patch was over, they kind of went out of the game a bit, so they got their 6 points there and let Limerick back into the game before half time. And again, Limerick in the third quarter pulling away. Like, to be fair, Limerick 7 points up on the hour mark, and you're thinking this game is going to be an 8, 9, 10 point win for Limerick. But to be fair to Cork, and this is the bit we haven't seen in the years gone by, is the fight back to come back into it, and we've seen it all year. To be fair to get the point out of the Tipperary game, because once Tipperary got a handle on Cork that day, they were the dominant team. And again with Clare the last day, so close. But at stages of that game, we thought Clare were going to pull away and win easily, but Cork didn't let that happen. Now, another side of it is we talk about positives. We listen to Cork people, will tell you about all these young hurlers coming up, but there's still a reliance on Pat Horgan and Harnedy. 118 between the two of them yesterday. That's where, if Pat Horgan does decide to step away this year, 35 years of age, it wouldn't be, a big shock if he did. Look, I think he's probably still good enough to play, but if he does, where them scores going to come from? I know Robbie Flynn was probably a big loss, but there's young guys there, but there's big shoes to fill to come up to the caliber of Horgan and Harnedy.
No, absolutely, and I suppose Rory, going talk about Patrick Horgan as well. 114 yesterday, made an absolute masterclass from him. His work rate, turnover of ball, like thinking in terms of that opening half where he dispossessed Cathal O'Neill, who got maybe kind of caught once or twice, particularly in the middle third. But magnificent return from Patrick Horgan, and hopefully this is not the last we've seen of Patrick Horgan in a Cork jersey.
And that's something he's had to work hard at. It wasn't naturally part of his game, the tackling and it wasn't, but it's something he's brought with him a bit more this year. Like, so often you think when guys are hitting that age that that you're going to get less work rate from him, but it's the opposite. It seems to be this year. You've Noel McGrath has never worked as hard with Tipperary and has been in Tipperary's big performances this year, especially against Limerick. He was exceptional, especially with his tackling as well. And we had that from Patrick Horgan yesterday too. The one thing I do think Cork maybe are missing inside is that big aerial threat in the inside, like Limerick have with Gillan and Clare had with Duggan up in Ennis the last caused problems. I know Horgan caught a high ball that was for a goal against Clare, and Horgan is good in the air, but that real outlet that you can just launch a high ball in there, because it's paying dividends as we saw on the Joe McDonagh, which we'll get onto later on. But it does help to have that. I know Dalton is very good in the air, but him outside at wing forward, maybe if they could switch him in around the edge of the square, if he a bit more often. Harnedy as well, like kind of switching in and out, but just maybe a bit more often have that big guy in around the edge of the square, get him in around, because as we saw, like yesterday, like Gillane in a way won Limerick the game with his aerial ability inside. And when Limerick are in trouble, you can just launch a high ball in, and the knowledge that he'll either win it or break it in there. And that's maybe one small thing they're missing from the attack. Ben Cunningham, as we've seen, is quite good in the air. Maybe it's something Pat Ryan will try and add to their forward line for next year. Just that try it inside,
I think Rory, like Gillane and Flanagan just have that such a partnership, and it's built up like over years. It's nearly telepathic at times, and as you said, if Gillane doesn't catch it, he'll break for Flanagan, and they just seem to have that an understanding together. I suppose it doesn't come easily, but I suppose the only thing for Cork is like they seem to rotate their 15 a lot as well, so it's hard to get a bit of consistency going when you're like Darragh Fitzgibbon's midfield one day, he's wing forward the next, and they've played 3 different full backs this year. I know the full back has been a problem for Cork, like we had Rob Downey, Owen Downey and Damien Cahalane, so I do think to a certain extent they need to stick maybe pick guys, especially in the spine of the team, and work around it. But there's been a lot of chopping and changing. I know there's been injuries too, but there's a lot of chopping and changing in Cork more so than other counties.
Yeah, and that's why as well next year I think that they probably will be stronger, because Pat Ryan is still only his first year, and he was still still a small bit of experimentation going on, because in the league you can only learn so much, because teams are a lot of shadow boxing, so you only find out in the heat of battle. Unfortunately, is the only way to find out, and I'm sure he has learned lots about certain players that he probably doesn't fancy putting out there again. So that's another reason why I think they're probably going to be that bit stronger next year. There'll be something to build on for him, like, definitely. And they will take a bit of heart from it. Obviously, they're going to be gutted with how close they were, but they will take heart that things do seem to be going in the right direction.
Plus, you have players come back in. Mark Coleman, I think, as well, will be a huge addition next year.
Robbie O'Flynn
as well. 2 players of that quality will add so much to that team.
No, absolutely. No, I think the future looks extremely bright. We'll talk about the under-20s, but even going back to Limerick here, Kieran, in terms of the midfield, I thought the midfield partnership of Darragh O'Donovan and William O'Donoghue, again, this is backs against the wall for Limerick. All the media punditry that was written about him and during the week, and I thought those two, particularly in terms of their link-up play, William O'Donoghue covered acres of ground in TUS Gaelic grounds, pivotal for that second goal for Cathal O'Neill as well, just before half-time, to kind of create a cushion. Now, Cork did come back due to, I suppose, Limerick and discipline, but I suppose from a Limerick midfield perspective, I suppose it's very heartening to see the midfield partnership really top of the ground on yesterday.
Yeah, a real work rate, like, from Will O'Donoghue. I think he's been, the real, I suppose people call him the Terminator in there. The work he brings and the disruption he brings to teams, but I think it was Will O'Donoghue's best game yesterday in a long, long time. Did a lot of work to get through, and I think with the half back line as well. I think even score wise, like was a 1-6 from the half back line. I think Will O'Donoghue had a point as well, and Barry Nash. So I think even from 1 to 9, like, there could be one, maybe 8 or 9 there, like, which is huge. Other teams don't have, but definitely that middle third, there was a lot going on there, and I think Limerick definitely topped that battle. And I think we've had players for the last couple of games who haven't been, shown their usual form. I think Kyle Hayes had a huge game yesterday. I think he was really, really impressive. Getting runs back up the field, really impressive point there. Running the length of the sideline, just working really hard. Same with Crowd Hegarty getting back in. It wasn't at his very, very best, but showing signs that he's getting back there. Worked really hard. Didn't get involved in any off the ball stuff. I think Downey was goading him there at one stage, and didn't really react to such. Huge point at the end, catching a puck out and putting over the bar to put distance between them. And he definitely isn't the player he was when in 2020-21, but such workers and the mileage he covers in the 70 minutes, it's irreplaceable, really. And I suppose that's one aspect for me that I'm really happy with, is the players who were a little bit off colour the last couple of weeks are starting to kind of come back into it a bit now. And I don't think the Munster final was on our radar coming into the game. It was all talk about just trying to stay up and trying to be in third place. And, obviously results elsewhere helped with that. But, it's probably bonus territory in the fact that I don't think it was expected. I think you're one win away from being, if you can get to an All-Ireland semi-final, it buys you some time. And, that's the route Limerick want to go, I'm sure.
No, absolutely. And I suppose, Ruairi, concluding this, I mean, we can talk about the Limerick penalty all we want. I think Tim O'Mahony's missed straight after. I thought it was a major game changer here for Ruairi as well from Cork straight afterwards. We talked about that direct ball, and that was one of the direct balls that really did pay dividends for Cork. But going back to Limerick and that discipline issue, particularly the three backs getting yellow cards in the opening period, I suppose from a clear perspective here, Ruairi, you know everything that needs to be known about Limerick at this stage, but was there anything else that new here from a clear perspective that you feel that Brian Lohan and management may look to expose given that performance yesterday?
Yeah, I suppose with the incident of the penalty, like Gillane will probably be watched a bit more closely, and that one. Look, I wouldn't fault James Owens for it, because like when we all saw it, looked the penalty. It was only the replay from behind the goals you could see that that Gillane had I don't know who's early, but that's like where there's umpires 10 yards away from those things. Like, and I don't know, maybe the GA should actually for the big games have one referee maybe at either end as an umpire, even just so when he comes in to consult, like he's consulting with a guy who knows the rule book inside out, as opposed to a neighbour down the road who's helping out doing umpiring. Like, it's just a thought maybe when you get to big championship matches, because even as well the incident, like I thought I was 100% sure that Cahalane had picked the ball off the ground, but then we saw another slow motion footage where there was an inch of a bounce. So again, that could be an umpire who was 10 yards away or whatever, had a view of it, could say, oh no, that wasn't a pickup. Small things like that, like, but overall, like, I wouldn't fault Gillane for what he did. Like, you do it, you can get away with it, and if you've a subtle way of doing it, like, because as we know, like, corner forwards, full forwards are being held, and it's part of the game. So for it to go the other way around, if you can get away with it and win a penalty, like, in a way, because I'm sure it's been done the other way, players trying to get free out as well. So but yeah, look, from a clear point of view, I suppose, again, you are kind of there is still maybe that discipline thing, but as Kieran said, the fact that they kept their heads with the yellow cards, because some of the yellow cards came quite early, especially the two wing backs. And that, in the past, maybe another heavy challenge could go in and suddenly you've a red, whereas there was nothing else. And the players knew where the line was then after that. So yeah, look, James Owens coming in for a bit of criticism from Cork, but someone said, like, he was 60 yards away for the Gillane incident, but sure, like, the ball was struck long from what he can't, like, he's not Usain Bolt, like, he can't be there when the ball has been struck and be there when it lands. So that's why I think, like, they're talking about having a second ref, but maybe just get the umpires to be a bit more involved in incidents, like, especially like ones at goalmouth incidents like that.
I think at the time, as you said, Roy, we all thought it was a penalty, and I suppose it took a few looks back. But that's, look, we're all up to the slate referees, and he had given a free against Gillane earlier for the same offence. So I'm sure if he'd seen it, it would have been same results. We've been talking about listening to cows come home. There's no right answer, but it's definitely the game has gone too fast for one man. I think it raised the issue about maybe even just like a TMO that the referee can just review it once. Big decisions like that can have impact games. There's definitely something that has to be done, because the small little things like a free given for a throw ball, or a free which might have been a hand pass, or a pickup, they come and go in games. Like, I'd say they level each other out over the course of a year or a couple of games, but big decisions like that that can impact the game have to be looked at.
No, I thought it was an incredible adversion. I mean, I think Cork exited the championship with their heads held high, and I think massive opportunity there for them next season to really put a marker down, particularly in the league. I suppose congratulations to Limerick, and I suppose the unlikely, when they went to the dressing rooms, the presumed prelim, quarterfinal, 3 weeks, but then suddenly got word from FBT Semple Stadium of the events that unfolded between Tipperary and Waterford. And to be brutally honest here, guys, I was kind of dual watching it on monitors. Waterford were top of the ground. I mean, last week, Kieran, we'd kind of mentioned the Liam Cahill angle, and I think Liam Cahill probably dominated conversations with the sideline ban, but also I think Waterford had a point to prove yesterday. And I think so it proved. And I thought it was a very deserved win. And I think, to be perfectly honest, to tip, a 6-point loss probably flattered them on the basis of the 70 minutes in Thurles yesterday. I suppose, Ruairi, can get your thoughts first?
Yeah, like Waterford went with Desi Hutchinson inside, which is what the whole country had been screaming at for the last few weeks. And it just makes a big difference. Put your best players in their best positions. And
he scores 1-4, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like he was always capable of doing that. Like, he's one of the best corner forwards in the country. I don't know. Look, what it does show, though, is like the players were still playing for the manager. Because had they lost badly yesterday, I think Davies' position would have been in trouble based on, you know, what had gone on previously. So, like, it does show that there was faith in what he was doing with them. And he did get the reaction needed. The question marks, I suppose, now is why did they do it in one match and not in... Or sorry, why did they perform in two and perform so poorly in the other two? Like, that level of consistency, you know, you can still point fingers at management, I think, as well. And just putting your players in the best positions is maybe not trying to be overly clever by, you know, putting your corner forward midfield and, you know, even like Mark and Tony Kelly and Mossy Lyons. So Clare have done this before in the past with Waterford, where if they put Caleb Lyons or somebody like that on Tony Kelly, they put Tony Kelly in corner forward. So you end up with a guy who was never played cornerback, inside cornerback, and one of the best forwards in the country. And, you know, so I think sometimes, I don't know, is there an element of you put a kind of a bizarre choice of player to man mark, and then if he does really well, you get the plaudits for spotting what nobody else spotted. But look, all credit to them yesterday. Like, there was superb performance, and you're kind of like all this kind of talk that Waterford were finished and underage, they're in huge trouble and this and that. Just sometimes a couple of wins and things can change very quickly. So they need next year is huge for them. They have to be competitive in every match next year. They can't just turn it on and off like a tap, you know. But a big thing like having Patrick Fitzgerald, we all saw how promising he looked for Ballygunner. Having himself and Desi, two lads, and you spoke, Kieran, about a partnership of Galan and Flanagan. So these guys are playing with each other with their club week in, week out. And so having the two lads in there together, you know, I think it made a big difference. Waterford could hit the full forward line in the knowledge that Desi inside. And I think Fitzgerald got 3 points from play as well. So that's 1-7 from your inside too, like from play, you know. So yeah, look, that's the big question for Waterford next year. Like, if they go another year without qualifying out of Munster, I don't know if like big changes would be needed. But I just heard Derek McGrath talking earlier, and he was talking about that he didn't think the structures are too bad underage, that they've kind of been sorted, and we're not seeing the fruits of it yet. But like, to lose every game in the minor and every game in the under 20 and only win one game in senior so one win out of 12, let's say, round robin games, you know, it is a worry. Like, and there's no point maybe trying to say problems aren't there. Like, looking from the outside in, like for a lot of those games in the round robins in the under 20 especially, like, they weren't competitive really in any of the games. I think there was one game that was a one puck the ball in, and the rest of them they were beating 7-8 points, you know. So the next year is huge for them. Like, and look, they did have a lot of injuries this year as well. But to come out yesterday despite the injuries and perform like that, you know, it does show that they do have faith in their management, and it buys Davy another year anyway.
Do you think so? Yeah. You know, like, up to this weekend, I suppose there's so much negativity. I think there's deeper issues. Like, when you look back at the 3 or 4 years of round robin they've played in, and they've only one win, you know, before Davy's time and before Liam Call's time, you know, there seems to be something amiss there. Like, and, you know, I think Derek McGrath should learn from his past mistakes and speaking out. You know, I don't know, like, the proof's in the pudding, really, isn't it? You know, and they haven't been winning games underage, and that just doesn't start all of a sudden. Okay, maybe the works are in progress there, but you know, from afar, you wouldn't be too. I wouldn't be too confident, you know, with that. Just saying the works are there, but, you know, until they start winning games, you know, then you can start talking about, you know, how good they might be. But at the minute, I think there's still loads of question marks, and I think there's some deeper issues than just management and tactics. Like,
yeah, and even from the county board point of view, like, their county ground, like, we've been down to Walsh Park, like, I know they're finally doing works in it now, but even still, when it's finished, it's going to be still a small capacity, 15,000 capacity. But to give up 2 years of Munster Championship, have to play your home games, you know, in Thurles. 1 year they come up to Limerick for a home match and they against Tipperary. So like, to be giving up your home games, so 2 out of the 4 years of round robin, it's just, you know, whatever chance you have, like, you know, you need to be playing in front of your home crowd. And even they're giving out about the lack of support Waterford have. But if you go and see your team play at home and they perform, then you're going to go and follow them the next week when they're down in Cork or up in Ennis or something. But when you're travelling for every match, like, and it looks like the team aren't giving their all or whatever, you know, against Clare especially, like that you couldn't. It is hard to ask the supporters to travel for 4 games within 5 weeks for every match. Like, so I can understand from a Waterford supporter point of view why, like, they're probably a bit disillusioned with the whole thing. So yeah, it does look like they've had a lot of time to get their house in order, and hopefully, like, next year that they will be back with their home games. Now, I heard before, I don't know how true this is, that when Waterford IT were building their sports area, it's fantastic outside, and I'm sure the Waterford training, that they offered like a chance to build a stadium there, and it was turned down. As a county stadium, Waterford County Board turned down the opportunity to kind of go in with them and have a bigger stadium outside there. So, look, that it kind of maybe, like, they weren't really looking at the future, and now it's come back to kind of bite them, especially as Kieran pointed out, like, underage as well. It is a big worry. Like they're probably looking at the health of all the counties in Munster. You have to say that they're the ones that look in the most trouble, you know. But it can turn around very quickly. Like, Clare were in a similar situation not only just 2-3 years ago. Didn't get things right during COVID. Like, teams weren't really, you know, being looked after, while other counties were kind of still going away with programs and doing everything moved online. A few teams around then were neglected in Clare, but, like, it just shows how quickly you can get things right again too, especially with underage players. A couple of good years, you know, doing the right things, and things will pick up big time. We've seen it at Offaly as well. So look, it might take Waterford a couple of years to get back in the thick of it, but you still have to worry. Like,
I think it's an encouraging signs for Waterford though. Top of the ground, middle third, particularly Tipperary full forward line was completely routed in that opening period. I have a stat here: no Tip forward score from play in the first 13 minutes, and then for the last 18 minutes, no score from play as well. So I mean, they were completely on top. Waterford 14 wides during the game, and I mean, when you kind of think about it, this result could have gone so awfully wrong here for Tipperary. There was a response in the second half, then culminating on the Desi Hutchinson goal, which did kind of expose some defensive vulnerabilities. And I suppose, Kieran, it really did, for me, spell out an awful lot of maybe squad depth issues here from Tipperary. A massively physical, attritional game against Limerick. There had been injuries after that game, more notably Cathal Barrett in the full back line. Also Jake Morris, who we've talked about endlessly in the podcast, being a very prominent figurehead. And I think it showed yesterday, particularly on both sides of the pitch. I suppose Kieran, Liam Cahill came out afterwards really very concerned about the performance and thinks there's a bit of a rebuild of confidence heading into this Offaly game in 3 weeks' time. So, Kieran, I suppose plenty of issues here for Tip to maybe address before that.
Yeah, and I think you can add Jason Ford to that list as well.
Yeah.
The main man there. You know, I think we talked about this a few different occasions during the league. We predicted that Tipperary might struggle for depth. I think now it's starting to show that these issues don't arise usually during the league because there's certain players get bigger rest periods and so on and so on. And, you know, it's the attrition and the week on week of the round robin. You know, it puts a lot of strain on panels, and, you know, once injuries start cropping up, I think Gróda Connor went off as well the weekend or there yesterday against Waterford. So, you know, that's another huge. You know, I'm not sure what the injury was, but, you know, another big player from young player this year, but, you know, they might be used as an excuse. I think Tipperary were flat. There's no other way of saying it. You know, they were a patch of the intensity and the work rate they bought last week against Limerick, but they'll use the excuse of maybe, you know, being down forward and Jake Morris. But, you know, look at Waterford. They had no Prunty, no Jamie Byrne, and no Ozzie Gleeson, you know, which would be 3, you know, major players in that team. Tip were just flat. You know, I think they were caught in the hop. You know, I think mentally the word all week was that, you know, it was just a matter of showing up, you know, seeing the win out. Waterford were dead and buried. I think that might got inside their heads a little bit too. And, you know, there was Tipperary lads booking buses for Munster finals, and don't feel sorry for them, but, you know, that's the way it goes. There's nothing for granted, especially what we saw yesterday. At any stage, Tipperary, Cork or Limerick could have been gone. And, until it's over, until the final whistle goes, you just don't know what you're going to get in with the round robin. And I suppose it adds to the excitement of it all. But it's going to be a little bit of a low for Tipperary, thinking they were going to be in a Munster final after how they performed last year, and now facing into a longer road. Some ways it might suit them, getting a few extra games, but if it's going to add to injury lists and it's going to stretch the panel, it won't.
Absolutely. No, I think it's food for thought there for Tipperary, certainly. And I mean, from Waterford's perspective, I thought Davy Fitz and the management got their matchups completely right. The decision to bring Nolan out from goalkeeper to sweeper, I thought Liam Cahill and Michael Bevins were a bit slow to kind of react to that, particularly on the short puckouts. And Nolan had a glorious point there midway through the first half unopposed, really. And yeah, it just really showed the tempo, two teams in completely different tempos, and 3-week break for Waterford as well. Seemed to be timely as well, and a team that the pressure was off, and one team that realised very quickly in the first half that the game was getting away from them. I thought the performance for Tipperary was very flat, but maybe significant that Tipperary 2 back-to-back games here, and again the second game a little bit flat. But yeah, I think there's plenty to work with. Liam Cahill, hope's not lost in Tipperary. I suppose, guys, can we get to Leinster Senior Hurling Championship? Plenty of fireworks yesterday. Particularly in Wexford Park. Kieran, you're at it. You're based in Wexford. It was save our season all in Wexford all during the week. My question to you, Kieran, is can Wexford play Kilkenny every week? Because this consistency, I just can't understand where this performance came from after the previous week.
Yeah, but if you were to think about it, I think last week was just one of them things. They had everything done right in the first half, 16 points up. Fell away. I can't believe how at any stage they didn't stop the Ross. I suppose they had their goal chances last week, but I think you have to give take your hat off to them. The pressure them players must be going through all week. It's not like they were facing a team like Antrim or Westmeath. They were coming up against Kilkenny, their rivals, their neighbours, and they were coming to as I heard the phrase, to close the lid in the coffin and to do a job on them. And I thought early in the game, that's what it looked like was going to happen. The 2 early goals for Kilkenny, and if you look at it, they just walked through the defence. Owen Cody was just absolutely on fire. Yesterday, unbelievable. Tom Phelan as well had a great game, scoring 1-4. But Cody with 3-1, massive game. But I think Wexford just went back to the hurling of old. When I saw the full forward line named Ruairi O'Connor, Lee Chin, and Conor McDonald, you knew that the intent was going to pump long ball in on top of Chin and McDonald, especially they're the 2 ball winners, and I think that's what happened. They were nervy at the start. You could see it. They were taking shots on from, like we've seen in the Dublin game, from crazy distances out, hit a few wides, and they settled. They settled once. I think especially once the Chin's penalty went in, and 24 minutes they settled, and Kevin's goal, Foley's goal, shortly afterwards. And I think to bring it back in, I don't know if they were down by 7 or 8 points, halfway through the first half, and to go in at half time up by a point, that was huge. That was a huge turnaround. And then to lead by 7 points, midway through the second half, against the wind, really fought for it. I thought Kilkenny obviously took their goal as well, and at times it was probably made a bit easy for them. But, they definitely had chances where a lot of points were to miss, especially at the end. A lot of sloppy wides, and I think, to be fair, Wexford dug deep, and I think Chin, Oisin Foley tied a massive game. Cathal Dunbar coming on with the sideline cut and a point to probably seal the win, and positives all over the field, but really it's papering over the cracks. There's issues there. There's going to be a long winter, and a few months ahead. A lot of work is needed. There's a lot of guys the wrong side of 30. We spoke with us over the last few months, and it's, while it was a good performance to secure their Liam McCarthy status, and while they celebrated like it was an All-Ireland final win, when they go back home and they think about it over the next few days and weeks, they're out of the Leinster hurling. They're out this year. The hurling is over, and there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Rory, get you in there. I mean, it's a fantastic result for Wexford. I mean, but as Kieran said, an awful lot of work to be done. And I think Lee Chin maybe eloquently raised that during post-game, that an awful lot to do with structures and winning the club scene in Wexford needs to improve. So, I mean, Ruairi, it's a great win. I mean, great win for Darragh Egan and the management. They've been under a bit of flack recently as well, along with the players. But as Kieran has said, plenty to work on, particularly in this end of season review, but going into the league next season.
Yeah, and finally the Leinster Championship delivered. Like, there was a day of drama in Leinster as well as in Munster. Look, Wexford are surprising because under 20, like for the last 7-8 years, they've had Kilkenny's number underage and been very competitive with them. Yeah, so like same at senior, but they don't seem to bring it through when they're playing the likes of Dublin. Like even Antrim was a close fought game down, in Wexford Park as well. Like, and to lose to Westmeath then, after being up 17 points, like how can you do that one week and then beat Kilkenny the next week? Like, it just, it defies logic in a way. And we talked about Waterford being up and down. Like, that must have been the most up and down 7 days in the history of the Leinster Championship. Like, to go from that second half performance last week to what they produced yesterday. It just shows like it's there in them. Like, if they can do it yesterday, why can't they do it throughout the championship? So that's something like that. Really, consistency has to come in, and Leinster needs Wexford really competitive. Like, if we ended up in a situation where Wexford were relegated yesterday, like you would have a weaker Leinster Championship next year, like, no doubt about it. And and they would have only had themselves to blame had it been the case. But like, when you look at how competitive the Munster Championship is, and we did say at the start that everyone named Galway Kilkenny as their 2 Leinster finalists, and that's how it's turned out, even though Galway had a bit of a wobble yesterday. But like in Munster, you couldn't. I know it's turned out to be Clare and Limerick again like last year, but up until the last minute yesterday, no one was sure what the combination was going to be. So I think at one stage yesterday you had Cork and Clare in the Munster final. Then you obviously Tip were never in a situation yesterday where they were going to be in the Munster final. But before yesterday, they were the favourites to be in the Munster final against Clare. Then end up with Limerick in it. So right until the last minute, no one knew. Whereas like in Leinster, you could easily have predicted that before the championship started, that it was going to be either we feel Dublin or Wexford would be the third place team. Dublin showed a bit yesterday, like they outfought Galway completely in the first half. Like, it was just pure will and desire as well, and Galway could not get a handle on Burke inside. So yeah, look, it's probably maybe a bit of a warning to whatever team loses the Munster final will end up playing Dublin. Like, it'll be a warning to them, like that, if you take your foot off the pedal at all, like, they have the ability to hurt teams,
Yeah, that was a mightily impressive first half performance, Kieran, from Dublin. They really routed Galway, particularly in that middle third, and I suppose helping no small measure with 2 absolutely kamikaze goals from Galway to concede. I suppose when Aidan Murphy, misjudgment, yes, but then the subsequent second goal, over elaboration, passing from the back, resulting in Danny Sutcliffe going in for the goal. I think Henry Shefflin got the reality check yesterday with a few of the new players, I would think. Lucky to get a draw, but realises if that level of performance happens in an All-Ireland qualifier series, it'll be an early exit for Galway.
Yeah, I think one decision Dublin made that we questioned was to play their 2 home games at Croke Park, and I think they justified their decision for that. Getting the win against Dublin or against Wexford, and pushing Galway all the way. Dublin have pace. They're a very quick team, and I think the big field in Croke Park suited their play. I think Donald Burke probably wasn't at his very best we've seen in days gone by. He's still at 10 points, but 7 from place balls. It's just, you'd worry, okay, while they had a great first half, to fall apart in the second half. Only scoring 6 points in the whole second half. It's great to push Galway that far, but you need to back it up and come out again in the second half and come out fighting and push on that. You shouldn't be letting the lead that side slip at that level. I don't think, like, Dublin were fighting for, and it was in their hands to go into a Leinster final. I won't say it. So while Dublin were good in the first half, I think you could say that Galway definitely got things right in the second half. There's one period there where Galway, between the 44th and 52nd minute, Galway scored 1-4 to no score from Dublin. I think that really got them back on track, and over the last Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and over the last 10 minutes, then the clawed back was a 4 points difference in the 60th minute, and the clawed that back. And I think, to be fair to Donald Burke, we've talked about him all year, how good he is, but that last point to equalise the game, from the sideline, that was no easy point to take and for free. And fair play to him. And I suppose while Dublin will be probably happy with a point, I definitely think Micheál Dunne won't be happy the way they fell apart in the second half.
Yeah, I thought Galway did make an awful lot of adjustments, didn't they? Particularly in the puck out. They gave an awful lot of puck outs to the centre half back, Burke from Dublin. An awful lot of easy outs, but they all pushed up on the puck out after minute 14. Joseph Cooney was brilliant, I thought, for Galway throughout. Particularly in that first half when things weren't going well. He was the one that was really kind of creating the running opportunities, the running lines. 5 points from play. Kevin, his brother as well, tipped in with 3 points as well. I suppose the ominous point here was the inside full forward line impact at certain points. Conor Whelan was pretty nullified. You could probably talk about in terms of distribution. But all in all, I think Galway was a mixed bag. They got into a Leinster final, and I suppose for Dublin here, Ruairi, it's how would you define the Dublin campaign so far? It's probably had a few highs, a few lows. I suppose yesterday they have shown the potential, what they're capable of, but it's over a 70-minute performance, really.
They had a zero impact from their bench as well when Galway were coming back at them, and they needed, subs to come in and make a difference. I think just missing the likes of Chris Crummy this year and that has weakened their squad. Like, Considine came in, made no real impact, and just a few. Whereas Galway were bringing in subs that were making a difference as Dublin were beginning to tire. It's probably their big weakness going forward as well. Like, if they get a run on the Munster runners up, let's say, and they Dublin lead by 5-6 points, I think the Munster teams will be thinking that they're going to be a point where the bench will decide things. And looking at it yesterday, like, Dublin definitely need more of an impact coming off the bench. Look, I think Donoghue will be happy that he's, first of all, like, Wexford are probably slight favourites going into the championship to maybe get that third spot, like they did last year. But Dublin, as we said, like, there was a time yesterday where they were going to be in the Leinster final, which I think would have been huge for them. But the way they came apart, and for in the end, Dublin were probably the lucky team to draw in the end. But being up 12 points in the second half, and just the manner of the way Galway came back at them, I think is going to be worrying for Dublin going forward. But look, from a development point of view, I'm sure Donoghue was delighted that they're going to the All-Ireland series now. Even against Kilkenny as well, there was that same, like, they hung with Kilkenny for a long time and were hanging in that 3-4 point area where if they got a goal, they were right in it, but then just faded again near the end as well. So that's the biggest worry, I think. He has to, whether it means rejigging the whole team, so you do have one or two players to come in that will, lift the team at certain points of the game. Like, that would mean then he's not starting his strongest team, but he will have some sort of an impact near the end of the match, because look, that's 2 games against the 2 bigger teams. Look, just another thing as well, like we talked about the difference in Munster Championship, Leinster Championship. I think if you give away the goals Galway did in the Munster Championship, you're not winning the match. Like, we saw what happened Clare and Ennis. You give away soft goals and you're out. Like, your chances of winning the game are, minimal. Like, so for Galway to actually, as you said, kamikaze goals is the best way to describe them. Don't know what Murphy was doing in the first one. Like, just kind of waved his hurley at the ball and let it slip past. And then for TJ Brennan to play a ball like that across his own goals, like in the yard at lunchtime, a young lad kicking the ball across his own goals playing soccer, you're giving out to him, like, let alone in Crow Park, and he had a championship battle to do it. Like, it was, madness. But the fact that they kind of still came on and got a result and were, last puck of the game, they were from winning it. It kind of just, I don't know. I think Galway make mistakes like that going forward. And yesterday was worrying for Galway. I thought now it was the first time where you could, like, teams will see lots to other management could dissect what Dublin did in the first half there. And there's a lot of work for Henry to do now to try and patch things up, I think, going into the Ireland series. But we do know Galway have this thing where they can come out with one-off performances as well, especially when they're kind of written off now too. Yeah, like, it's probably going to end up Leinster runners-up will be playing Tipperary in an Ireland quarter-final. Like, so, that's going to be an interesting game when it gets to it as well.
And it'll be strange if we're going into the Leinster finals, but I think Galway haven't been asked any questions really this year. Obviously the drew with Kilkenny, but they'll need a serious, increase in intensity going into that Leinster final. And Kilkenny themselves have questions to answer, conceding 4 goals yesterday. And then the injuries as well, obviously Mikey Butler, Massey Keown and Adrian Mullen going off. I don't know, we need them guys to be fit back in 2 weeks' time. So I think both teams, while they're top the group, I think internally themselves will have huge question marks going into that game and going forward towards the All Ireland series because I suppose there is a debate whether the Munster teams are battle hardened and have some huge games under their belt, and I suppose the opposite argument is, does it tire them out come the latter stage? But I think to have that for the likes of Limerick and for the likes of Clare going forward, to scrape by wins by 1 point and have to battle to win it, that has to stand here going forward into the latter stages. And I think that's why there's obviously of talk of Munster versus Leinster teams, and that's why I think why Wexford need to be in the Leinster Championship, because while this year they're not going great, on their day they had to have very good players. On their day they're up there, and I think they proved that last year. They were pretty close to taking Clare in the All-Ireland quarter-final, and again in 19 they were probably should have got to an Ireland final. So while their form isn't great this year, there's still not a whole lot off the bigger teams, and they're needed in Leinster because as it's not competitive as it is, and to have any chance of being competitive, these big counties, hurling counties, are needed.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it makes the Leinster final as well. It gives another dimension because no team now is going to want to face Tip in a quarter final. So whereas the Munster runners up will fancy their chances against Dublin. There's no point saying otherwise. Like they will. Whereas like you're coming off a defeat of a Leinster final and you're facing Tipperary then a couple of weeks later. Like it's going to be, it's going to be a huge ask for whatever team loses the Leinster final. So I think it adds another. Like all the talk that day, both finals are on the same day. Like all the talk is going to be Clare Limerick Munster final, but now you've Kilkenny Galway will be more of a knockout feel to that one, obviously, because you're hoping to avoid Tip, get an easier.
I agree. I do think Tip will be there, but I don't think they'll get it all the way against Offaly either. Offaly are going to be hurting after Saturday, and they've been really consistent this year, and up until the more. And if Tip played the way they played yesterday, you'd fancy Offaly to give them a good, I'm not saying they're going to beat them. If Tip were to come up with the same attitude yesterday, they'll push them a lot of the way.
Yeah, well, if Offaly are coming off an under-20 All-Ireland win as well, they'll have momentum and huge support. So, absolutely. At the same time, like Tipperary have a good record against when they come up against like the Joe McDonagh teams, or they seem to be able to put teams away is one thing. Tip too, because they're so clinical. But as you said, like if there's a repeat of yesterday, like they're get off to a bad start and Offaly a bit of momentum, but at the same time, like it's hard to see Tipperary being turned over there.
You'd imagine Ford will be back by then, and Kyle Barrett, Jake Morris will be back. I think it's 3 week time for that game, isn't it? So you'd imagine the big guns will be all back.
Exactly. I think the likes of Morgan, I think, is unlikely or is actually progressing quite well. I think from Liam Cahill's perspective, Barry Heffernan is unlikely to feature given the post-game comment. So you all to look forward to. I suppose we can conclude Leinster here, guys. What difference a week makes. This time last week, Westmeath were on a crest of a wave after beating Wexford. Today they're facing the reality of going into Joe McDonagh. Ruairi, I suppose, all credit to Antrim. They went to Cusack Park, Mullingar, and got the job done under difficult circumstances. But I suppose you have to feel sorry for Westmeath here, given the result they had previous week, now going into a second-tier hurling competition.
Yeah, because I presume at half-time the previous week they were doomed to, down into the Christie Ring into the Joe McDonagh. And then for them to turn things around and win the game, they must have thought like that, And there is a debate, I suppose, that another year with their progression playing in Leinster Championship would bring them on a bit more. To be honest, I just don't think they have the pick. Like they don't have as big enough a hurling area to sustain. But like for them to last year draw with Wexford, this year beat Wexford, like it does show like they're not very far off the top teams. Like, but again, like it's going to be a minefield now next year to get out of Joe McDonagh, even for Westmeath. Look, credit to Antrim. That's one failing that we've had previous years with Antrim, that they were actually kind of getting turned over when it came to these games. They performed very well against the top teams. But when it would come to a relegation type match, that they'd often get turned over in it. So at least this year they kind of that didn't happen to them, and they won the game they had to win, which was yesterday.
Absolutely, Kieran. Goals came at vital times here for Antrim, particularly in that first half. 2 early goals. Now credit to Westmeath after that card of Elliott. They went in 2 points up, but I thought Antrim's third quarter performance was absolutely superb. 10 points to 3 for Antrim between the 41st and 65th minute. Really did seal their place in Tier 1 this year. And I know the late goals from O'Neill and McNaughton really put a nice gloss on the result. But I mean, for Westmeath, that third quarter is where this game was lost.
Yeah, I think the only kind of part of the game where Westmeath did well was just before half time, getting that 1-4 and bringing it back to, they were 112 to 2-7 ahead. But, that third quarter, 10 points to 3, in favour of Antrim, and obviously the 2 late goals, putting a gloss on it. To be fair, you have to say Antrim in control of that game from start to finish, bar that section before half time. And I think well deserved. I think Antrim, of the 2 teams, have been, they've shown a lot more this year, while they haven't won as many games or won many games. There've been a lot of positives in games, and they've been putting up big scores. Put up 320 in Nolan Park only a few weeks ago. And I think that's
should have beaten Dublin as well in round 1.
Should have been, yeah, absolutely. That's the point behind there in the first game out. They are making improvements. Look, there's still a huge gap between what Antrim are at and the top counties are at, but the work is continuing, and I'm sure they'll make strides again next year with Carlow coming up. It'll be another battle for them. But I do think Westmeath are at a kind of a crossroads now. Joe Fortune said he's 2 years done there. Can he bring any more? I think there'll be a lot of question marks in Westmeath this year. I think there's a couple of guys who are due to kind of the age of retirement, and football will always be number 1 in Westmeath. I think as much as we'd like to see him come up more, it's hard to see much more progression from them. I think after going down as well, we know how hard Joe McDonagh is to come out of. You're still going to have Offaly there next year. You're going to have Kildare. Kildare gone down. You're going to have, Laois, Kerry as well. Some big teams. It's going to be another, huge task to come out of Joe McDonagh again next year. And I think after coming down, I really think they're at a crossroads, and there's going to be I think there could be a lot of change. Personally, I don't think Darragh Egan is going to be in Wexford next year. Is Joe Fortune a possibility? He's an Enniscorthy man to take over. I think obviously we're going to touch on the Joe McDonagh. Tom Mullally, his stock went up hugely. I'm sorry, everywhere he's been, he's had success. He was he gave a spell with the Wexford under 21 a couple of years ago. He's a potential prospect to me, to possibly get the main job. But there's so much change, I think, for Westmeath. I know the point I'm trying to get to. It was a big kick in the teeth after last weekend. The heroics and the celebration they had. I was talking to a guy locally who lives up there, and he said they were on the beer all week. So that's how much it meant to them. And it'll be a roller coaster between last week and this week to then go down. So look, I think they've been incredible. We often questioned how this had the motivation to keep going, taking beatings week on week out, every week from league into championship. It can't be easy to keep it going, and I'm sure if you're not loving your hurling, it'd be very hard to stay at it next year again. So I think anyone with doubt will step away. But I think they've made great strides, but I just struggle to see them making further steps of improvement up along.
Yeah, I think personnel changes afoot there in Westmeath. I think there's 1 or 2 guys going to call it a day anyway. Sad to see like Killian Doyle, Tommy Doyle as well, who was outstanding all season again. The likes of Davy Glennon as well came in with a few points yesterday, but all credit to Antrim. I think it's a huge result for them to continue their player development and intercounty development here as well. We know the club scene in Antrim is alive and well, and I think it bodes well for next season. I suppose, guys, we've talked about it. Joe McDonagh Cup final. What an absolute classic on Saturday, Ruairi.
Oh, absolute belter. And Carlow to dig it out in extra time after, having the extra man in normal time, and you could say it looked like they blew their chance in normal time, with the way the game finished, conceding the last few scores in injury time. But for Carlow, it just showed, his name just your man inside in the full. We're talking about the ability to win ball in the air inside.
Well, Boland,
for him to score 1-3. Boland, to score 1-3 and create the penalty as well. So it just shows I think there's an element of teams, you're in training matches where you're marking a certain type of corner forward all the time, or and then suddenly you go into a game and you have a guy who's catching the ball a bit unorthodox, who's brilliant in the air, and it can cause panic in a team. And like I thought the Offaly full back line were fairly panicked every time a high ball came in there. And to score 1-3 and also win the penalty and set up other scores as well. That really kind of gave Carlow, a weapon on the long ball as well. Look, all credit to them, like, because I even thought like Carlow looked at the end of normal time, a few players were cramping, and I thought, momentum was going to be with Offaly going into the extra time. But I suppose, even though they're back to 15 players, the fact that a lot of the guys had played, probably had to cover for that extra man during the course of the 70 minutes, maybe, came at them a bit in extra time, because it took a huge effort for them to claw their way back to it. And, when it looked like they were dead and buried in normal time. So, yeah, look, fair play to Carlow, who saw it out. And at the start, when we looked at the league, it was quite obvious what Carlow were at this year. Like, we were very worried about them and thought they had made personally, I got things completely wrong reading Carlow based on the Kildare score that from the league match where they got annihilated. But they obviously had their sight set on Joe McDonagh, and well done. Like, I think they're a deserving team to go up. Like, they rode their luck a bit at times, especially against Laois, where they equalised at the very end, last minute goal. But when they got their chance, and they took it, like, and fair play to them. And some of the hurling in it was outstanding. Some of the scores, long range shooting from both sides as well. There were some outstanding points from distance. Kavanagh again showed great leadership, I thought. Dolan as well on the wing, excellent as well. Like, so, they deserve their chance in Leinster Championship next year. Like, and you just hope that they can be competitive. When we say competitive, like, I don't expect them to go out and beat Kilkenny or beat Galway, but just be competitive in matches and hang in there and put up the scores. Like, Antrim are competitive in the Leinster Championship. Like, that's one thing you could say about them. As Kieran said, like, scoring 320 down in Nolan Park, and should be beating Dublin up in Antrim. You want Carlow to be a bit like that as well, and not kind of go out there and take some serious beatings. Like, that would be a worry for them. But look, they were brilliant the other night. That was an unbelievable advert for the Joe McDonagh Cup, which gets very little coverage. Like, and even if TG Carr or somebody were just given the games to show live throughout, because like that was the only game that was shown live, and the whole thing was the final. And like, there are hurling people up and down the country who would want more of that, like, because the teams are very close to each other, which makes the games very competitive. And look, we ended up with an outstanding final.
Yeah, because we've covered this at length during the year. The Division 2A had so many subplots with Kildare's emergence. We'd also had the round robin here, where it went down to the last day of the round robin campaign. So, I mean, I was at the Carlow-Laois game, and Carlow, and for all intents and purposes, Laois looked as if they were going to win that game, but Carlow came back the last 15 minutes magnificently well, and that was a season final performance. But I suppose, Kieran, accuracy from Offaly, they're going to have an awful lot of regrets coming out of this game. 24 wides, there was 5 or 6 balls that came in short as well to Tracy, who cleared up. I thought Carlow's proficiency in front of goal was absolutely huge, and this is throughout the game. They picked their moments well, didn't they?
Absolutely. I think the more pressure is on Offaly. I think because they carried on the winning ways of the league into the championship. But I thought at half time, 5 points down to 14 men, I thought it looked pretty ominous from then. And I think, to be fair, the fact that they battled and being 4 points down going into added time to bring it back level, fair play to them. Like, there was, like the man, or whoever sent off, Dara, what's his name, sent off early. Dara. Yeah. Like, it was early enough in the game, so they battled a lot of that game with 14 men. I think Ruairi hit the nail on the head where, you're doing that a bit extra to carry on for the missing guy, and that shows, especially when you come into extra time. I thought, while they were 5 points down at half time, to bring it back level into full time and going back up to 15 men, you would have been probably, if you're a bet man, you would have been putting your money in Offaly, having that momentum. But Carlow did battle. It was just an incredible game from end to end. But like 24 wides any day does not help your cause. I think as well, Cahill probably not as influential scoring wise. Like, we've seen him put up probably 112, 113 every day he's gone out this year, but he come in with 8 points. So on different days, but they've had a spread of Killian Kiley with 6 points, David Nally with 5 points, Charlie Mitchell as well getting the goal and points as well with it. So we've talked about the Munster Championship and how much of a roller coaster it is and excitement it is. Sure, the Joe McDonagh was every bit as exciting all year. I think Rory is a great point that these games need to be shown. If they can show the Tailteann Cup on RTE, why can't they show the Joe McDonagh Cup? RT seem to be gone football mad, really, because I think even from a Wexford point of view, no Wexford game was shown on free tier RT this year, and I think every county deserves their fair shot. Not everyone can go to games and or has access to GA Go, and I think every county deserves to get there. From a hurling point of view, how do you promote it? How do you get young guys interested in their own county? Seeing the Carlow jersey or the Offaly jersey on TV, that does the world of good to young guys watching it, and they want to be like them players when they get older, all this kind of thing. So while hurling, the hurling people promote hurling, I think the likes of GA and RT need to do more. There's a lot more needs to be done, I think.
Congratulations to Carlow and commiserations to Offaly. I mean, Offaly into Division 1A or 1B next season. But again, that's going to be no consolation for Johnny Kelly and management and players here. But I suppose looking at the prelims, I think we talked about the Tip Offaly game. I think that might be potential banana skin for Tipperary. Dublin travelled down to Netwatch Cullen Park in 3 weeks against Carlow. Roy, do we see any potential upset here?
Yeah, I think this is more likely upset in this one than in the Offaly Tip game, because Dublin have shown frailties, like going up, as we mentioned, Corrigan Park in the first round, just coming off that what was a draw but must feel like a defeat to Dublin to have blown a 12-point lead, and you're coming up against a buoyant Carlow team now who, I think that could be a dangerous one for Dublin. But look, it'll sharpen. They know that as well. It'll sharpen the minds for Donoghue. In a way, Dublin probably need a game to get the second half collapse yesterday out of their system. But Carlow will smell blood here, and they'll probably fancy their chances here of causing an upset. We haven't had one since Laois beat Dublin, remember? So Dublin have previous form in this. I see that one as the more likely upset, really.
Yeah, Kieran, I suppose from a Carlow perspective, the squad depth issues maybe surfaced. Only 2 substitutes before the 85th minute, which when you look at Offaly, we're throwing guys on here, pretty much early on. So hopefully for Carlow, their key players are back fit and well for 3 weeks' time, but I suppose they'll give it a right rattle. They gave Limerick a right rattle a few years ago, I remember, down in Cullen Park as well. So Dublin can't really underestimate this Carlow challenge with Tom O'Lally at the helm.
No, it's a free shot for Carlow, really, isn't it? And I think with the 3 weeks, it gives them time, to get their week, get the celebration out of the way. And well due after winning Joe McDonagh, they're entitled to celebrate. And they'll still have, I'm sure Tom O'Lally will give the week off and come back at it again in 2 weeks. And it is a free shot, really. I think there's no expectation in Carlow. But I think Roy said there, Dublin, they have lost in this position before. And I think, to be fair, Tom O'Lally, he's I think he's just shown he's a really, really good coach and manager teams. He's been involved with Clara and Kilkenny, Mount Leinster Rangers. He was with the Leinster under 21s. We saw what he did in Naas, got them they won the Leinster intermediate final. And obviously with Carlos in 21, he's done great work there. Jesus, we know, talking about Carlow men, Willie Mullins was a great lad to get a horse prime for a big day. And I think you said Mullins, they timed their run to perfection, really, didn't they? I said the league form was ropey at best. But week on week, they were getting better. They were scoring goals. They were really attacking goal every day, they were out. I think the turning point for Laois was that draw. For Carlow was that draw against Laois. There was a huge point to get, and they really kicked on from there. And this is a free shot for them, and I'm sure they'll take the chance, especially when it's at home.
Yeah, best luck to Carlow anyway. So it'll be. I know down in Boris Bagnallstown, even Carlow Town, it was pretty buoyant on Saturday night anyway. Good celebrations there, but look, again, hopefully they'll give it a right rattle here in the All-Ireland preliminary quarterfinals. Guys, before we go, All-Ireland minor and under 20 finals up for decision in FBD's Semple Stadium next Saturday. 2 watering fixtures here. I mean, the minors very hotly fancied Galway against Clare, and then the under 20s, the Cork juggernaut against probably one of the stories of the season with Offaly under 20s. I suppose, Rory, looking at the minors first, I think confidence is probably high in Clare here to give Galway as good as they're going to get.
Yeah, look, it's great that they're in the All-Ireland minor final, but we haven't won a minor since 1997. Even that team that won the 321 All-Irelands in a row, they won a couple of Munsters, but never won an All-Ireland. So it would be nice to win one. They don't come around very often. So when you're in there, you want the team to go out and perform. Look, they've been really good so far. And one thing I suppose the difference between both sides is Galway have a superstar in Aaron Nyland, and there's an interesting story. A buddy of mine, his dad is over in America on holidays, and as you do, tuned into Galway Bay FM to listen to the Ireland minor semi-final, and he rang his son to say there's a lad from the Aran Islands playing for Galway. He said, commentator keeps going on about the Aran Islands. He said, no, that's Aaron Nyland. But anyway, Aaron Nyland is a superstar, and he even last year he was probably the best forward in the minor championship last year, and he was a year younger than everyone else. But like Clare are completely opposite in that if you look at all their games, they've a spread of scores throughout the team. I think they've had a couple of games where they've had 11 scores. That's huge, like at minor. And if Clare can hold Nyland, and it's a big if, but if they can, and Clare's star player as well is cornerback Gunning, the captain from Broadford. He's been excellent in all their games, and he could be the man maybe for an Island, but to man mark, because they're going to have to try and man mark him. And if they do, they have every chance then. As I said, like Clare seem to have a larger spread, and when you're with a team where you're relying on one guy, to do the vast majority of the scoring, if there's ever a day when he's held, like, are Galway going to have the supporting cast to step up? Like, sure, we'll only find out in the day, but I think Clare will have a good chance. But at the same time, Galway are favourites going into it. Like, they have been, really putting teams to the sword throughout the Leinster Championship. And then look, it may be, as we said earlier, if it's a tight game, Clare have been in the tighter matches in Munster. Maybe they might have that battle and qualities, but just great to be in the final. And look, we're all looking forward to it, and it's great. The one weekend where there isn't a Munster Championship on, it's great to have the two All-Ireland minor and under-20s. Like, whoever did the calendar, picked a good weekend for it. Like,
oh, gorgeous weather planned as well, isn't it? So, but Kieran, I suppose looking at Galway, being based here in Galway myself, I mean, this has been a team that's been really highly touted since the start of the year. They had some prominent results even at Easter time. I think of that UPMC Nolan Park result against Kilkenny, beating Kilkenny in the Leinster final, and then in the semi-final, taking Cork to a 3-18 to 110 win. So, I mean, there's a potent inside full forward line there, the likes of Rabbit here, Holmes as well, Gilligan. But I suppose Clare will be very confident here, I would think, in terms of being battled hardened, as Ruairi was said. So this looks like a game that could go right down to the wire.
Yeah, I think if you look, I think the more pressure will be on Galway because of what they've done so far. Like, they've been beating teams by double-figure scores. I suppose we always question how strong the Leinster Championship is, and obviously certain teams mightn't be as strong as some of the Munster teams, but I think Galway, they really showed how good they are when they play Cork. The Cork Miners, obviously not a bad team, and I think Clare, while they have impressed, and they've come with probably a harder path to get there. I think it is all about that one guy for Galway, isn't it? Aaron Island is putting up huge scores, and I think as Rory said, if he can be held, if on the day he can be held, you give Clare every chance. But I think just on the form of what they've done so far this year and the scores they put up, and how, I suppose, well they've beaten teams, and and then the backroom squad that they have, the management there, you'd probably have to say Galway are favourites, but these are young guys, and it's an All-Ireland final. Who copes to the pressure the most? There's going to be a huge crowd here because Offaly alone are probably going to bring half of Offaly for this 20s game. So there's going to be a huge crowd, great atmosphere, and I know this wasn't touted to happen this way, that the minor and 20s game were on the same day, but I think it's something that could be looked at for the future because especially in Croke Park as well, and it's great for these young guys to get the opportunity and to play in such a big crowds. But come back to the point. I think I think you'd have to put Galway favourites, but I think Clare will relish the challenge, and they'll push them all the way. But I think for me, Galway will.
Yeah, but even from a Clare perspective here, Rory, as well, when we go to 20s in a minute, just in terms of the Clare performance against Kilkenny, I thought it was very impressive. I mean, the number of scores, I think it was 12 scores on the day, the distribution of scores, and as we've said here, Kieran and Rory, if they can cut the supply of ball into Aaron Nyland here, I think Clare have a massive chance. But I mean, they've shown good scoring prowess here as well, Rory. So,
yeah, as well, just a shout out to two of the local lads here, Matthew O'Halloran, who was on the team last year as well and playing super stuff, going between wing back, midfield, and Mark Sheedy in goals being sensational. He was last year's keeper as well. So a lot of the Clare boys got a good bit of experience last year, where they ended up playing Offaly in that Ireland semi-final, you know. So I think it stood to them throughout the Munster Championship this year. And as you said, yeah, just the fact that, you know, it is a real team effort. They're not really relying on one. If one forward doesn't fire, like they have, you know, scores from kind of all over the place, really, and midfield as well are chipping in with scores every game. Look, I'd give them a good chance, but it's hard to gauge how good Galway are. Like we before the championship even started, like word was that Galway were going to be the team to beat, and look, it has transpired that way. But finals are funny. Like these lads are only 17 as well. You don't know who's going to get a good night's sleep the night before a match, like who will be awake all night. Look, small things like that can affect players, and so look, it makes this age a bit more unpredictable. So yeah, I think if Clare go out and give a huge performance, they have every chance. But just the fact they're there, I think at this age level, you know, finals are there to be won. But at the same time, just being on the big day, getting players to experience that, you know, I think as we saw with Offaly last year, it didn't do them any harm to, you know, have lost the minor final, even the circumstances they lost it in. But didn't them no harm this year. Like those players were 7 of them playing in the under-20 team, like came out hungry to get out there again and experience the big day again. So it's not the end of the world if you don't win. I know players will feel that way when the full-time whistle blows, but just the fact to be there on the big day, I think, is huge.
Yeah, a little bit of hurt goes a long way, doesn't it, from a motivation perspective? But yeah, we can probably get predictions in a few minutes. Maybe under-20 final here as well, guys, straight after the minors. We have Cork against Offaly, and I mean, two teams here that, you know, an awful lot of neutrals will probably have had a look at. I think there have been 2 stories of the underage campaign here. Cork have been very impressive, but I think they've shown in the Munster Championship that, particularly Clare in the Munster final, that they really rattled into them in the third quarter. A sensational game, Limerick in semi-final, against an Offaly team that are really kind of put a head of steam up here, particularly with that win against Wexford in the Leinster final. So it'll be hopefully a good competitive game here on Sunday or Saturday evening.
Yeah, I think both teams have been impressive this year. You know, look at Cork all along. You know, I think the Clare games, I suppose, the last game, it really stands out. You know, they got a good head of steam and got ahead of Clare, but Clare battled back in the third quarter, and you know, they had Cork in all sorts of water. But to be fair, to me, it was the way they battled back. They didn't seem to panic. You know, they scored the last, I think, 6 or 7 points to get the win. You know, Ben Cunningham being the main guy there. They're you know, they're young, they're big physical side as well. You know, I think when you compare that to Offaly, who look in their own right have been really impressive. They're a younger team. I think, you know, 15 of the minor team last year have come up to 20s this year. You know, 10 of the starting team will be underage again next year. So I think it shows they're on a different path. I think this Offaly team are younger, and you know, geez, you wouldn't be writing off them winning Ireland if they don't do it this year in the next year or two, because you know, we've seen how good that, you know, that minor team was last year. You know, I think when you look back at the full forward line that was named against Wexford, like you Charlie Mitchell, Dan Ravenhill, and Adam Screeney, you know, that's as good as forward line you'll see in any age group, in any county. You know, and then you had like Dan Burke and, you know, young Spain behind them, and you know, I think they're balanced all over the field. I think as well, we maybe not so much in the Joe McDonagh final, but the Offaly teams this year have been really, you know, really set up really defensively and a strong defensive unit. And I think it was the same for that 20 team, especially against Wexford. Like Wexford pushed them all the way, and you know, Offaly with 14 men for the end of that second half, you know, battled well to win. And sure, look, the main guy behind it all, Adam Screeney, you know, if he just has a performance like he did against Wexford, you know, you give Offaly every chance. But I think just the fact that they're on different paths, I think Cork, they're probably going to be that bit more physical. No, in saying that, Offaly, they're not afraid to throw their weight about either. They work like dogs, but I think Cork have been probably more battle hardened. And you know, well, I'd love to see Offaly win it, and I think it would do great for their progression and for the county's progression.
I suppose, Kieran, to wrap up here, just from a minor under-21 prediction perspective, who are you fancying on Saturday?
I think in the minor game, look, I think you have to say Galway. I think they've been so impressive this year so far. The scores they put up, albeit look, the pressure is going to be on them, and I think Clare will give them lots of it. But I think for me, Galway, and I think the 20s, you know, really impressed with Offaly the last day. I just think they're on the younger side of the age group, and Cork will be definitely, as I said, more physical, and I think they're Cork's record in under 20s the last few years has been really good. They've won 4 of the last 5. So I think it'd be really hard to pick this Cork team. I think Offaly definitely in the next year or two, you wouldn't bet against them winning Ireland at this age.
Yeah, no worries, Rory. We'll get you back in here. Just in terms of the minor under 20, what are your predictions? I've been a clear man in the minors anyway. But even on the under 20s, who do you fancy on Saturday?
I fancy Cork. I think Leo O'Connor deserves massive credit for what he's done with Offaly. We knew there was talent coming through, but they needed somebody with the experience to bring it through and get them to that competitive edge. We have to remember, Offaly went into this championship as a tier 2 team in Leinster, and for them to end up Leinster champions is huge and fully deserved based on their performances. They were convincing winners over Galway in semi-final, and then to go out in the final with the pressure on and everything, and bring the trophy home again. It is big. And we were saying there earlier with the Joe McDonagh that maybe Offaly and Leinster with these young players coming through would have been, very important for their development. So I think it's very important that Offaly try and get out of Joe McDonagh next year with this talent coming through. At the same time, I think this Cork team are a serious team. That Munster final against Clare was an epic match. Just the likes of Ben Cunningham there, who we mentioned earlier, Owen Downey, they're a really physical team as well. Sometimes maybe on the edge of it, and it's something I think that their management are going to have to maybe warn them about in the final. But big physical players, Ben O'Connor, Wilkes, they're a huge team physically, and play that way too. They play a physical game, and they have the danger inside then with Healy inside as well as Cunningham. So they're not just reliant even though Screeney is just out of minor, he is their main man inside. He ignites the crowd. People say a 20 Kelly points worth 2, but a Screeney point is worth 2 as well for the Offaly crowd. He just he's a little magician. He's hands, he's balance, everything about him. The only thing he's probably lacking yet, obviously when he comes up against some of these Cork players, just that physicality of that'll come in time. But I just think Cork are probably going to have a bit too much for them. I'm going with Cork, but Offaly, it's a fairy tale journey for them really. And
I suppose for the 2 games for myself, going to just give a slight edge to Galway. But I wouldn't be all surprised if it is winning the last 5-10 minutes. The battle-hardened team here is Clare. I just think that Clare are more battle-hardened, and if they can get it into the trenches in the last 5 minutes here, I think all bets are off. I think the under-20s, the fast ground here, this is going to be an absolute classic match, shouldn't it, lads? Just in terms of Cork are very easy on the eye. Offaly traditionally great skill stick hurlers here. And I think that could be a very high-scoring game, but I would edge it to Cork. Just literally, there's an awful lot of weapons here. And I just worry in terms of Offaly getting Adam Screeney, getting that inside full forward line involved here. But I hope that Offaly do produce an absolute massive performance, because there will be 20,000 Offaly fans here. And it'd be interesting to see from a Cork contingent perspective. This team has been well supported. But Offaly are going to probably outnumber Cork here 2-1, I would say, in Thurles, given the location of this final. And it's really going to create a very carnival atmosphere here in Thurles. So, look, we hope for 2 great All-Ireland finals in underage. And I think it's great that these 2 fixtures are on back-to-back. And as you said, Kieran, I think we might have stumbled on something here. This may be in the calendar going forward here on a Saturday. In front of everyone, national spotlight, no provincials, no intercounty hurling here as such. I think it'd be all boding well here. I suppose, guys, we'll leave it there. It's been a lengthy one tonight, but we've plenty to cover and dissect. Many thanks to Kieran and to Rory Walsh. Many thanks, guys. I suppose next week we can have a review of these underage games, particularly the minor under 20s, and also have a kind of a preview of the Munster and Senior Hurling finals. Lads, until next week, have a good one. Take care.
You, Mark. Take care.
You, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.